And welcome back to Music Free Static. I hope you're having a fabulous day. And today I want to talk about my favorite Star Wars character, Ahsoka Tano. I love Ahsoka. Her story through the Clone Wars, into Rebels, even her brief appearances in The Mandalorian. I love this character. She is such an amazing character. And I'm really excited for the Ahsoka series, which is coming out. In fact, the first 2 episodes should be out today as this episode launches. So that is, I'm all excited. I seriously, I am very excited. And we'll talk a little bit about what I'm looking forward to in the show. But let's start talking about why I love the character of Ahsoka Tano. So to start, again, if you've never really seen Ahsoka, maybe outside The Mandalorian, or you just want to know what is all the fuss about. So Ahsoka as a character started in the Clone Wars. Okay. There was I think it went for 7 seasons, but the last 2 seasons sort of were tacked on. That sounds really insulting, but they were added later. The first 5 season run started with a movie which saw Anakin and Obi-Wan fighting in the Clone War. And this little teenage annoying kid, Ahsoka, shows up, says, I'm here as a Padawan to be assigned to Anakin. The idea is that the Jedi Council knows that Anakin's got a problem with attachment, and so what they're doing is giving him an apprentice to help him learn to let go. Okay. Obviously, we know this doesn't work out well for Anakin in the long run, but it was a good idea. So Ahsoka shows up, and she is this sort of smart aleck, sassy, cocky kid who takes, just sort of little snipes at everybody. In fact, she ends up getting the nickname Snips because she's snippy. All right. And, she's there. Anakin becomes Sky Guy to her, all this fun stuff, right? She's just a kid. But we see her grow. And she grows from that cocky, a really annoying kid to be, right? When the Clone Wars first came out, Ahsoka was hated. Nobody liked Ahsoka. It's like, why would you put Ahsoka in here? Now, George Lucas did it because he wanted a female Jedi to inspire his daughter, but but still, that was the idea. It's like everyone was annoyed by this character because she is annoying. But it's through her eyes that we see a lot of the issues that the Jedi Order has that lead to Anakin's fall. I'm not going to completely blame the Jedi Order for Anakin's choices in life, but we see that. Now, we also see Ahsoka grow. We see her fail, right? We see how her cockiness and that youthful, oh, I know better than you. We see how that fails her, right? Sometimes she succeeds. Sometimes it's like, oh yes, she does something really super daring and it works. Other times she does something super daring and it gets a lot of people killed. And we see those failures, and we see her grow. And after a couple of seasons, and you can really see it. She gets a costume change. She actually ends up using a second lightsaber, and she becomes still young. Obviously, you don't go from being young to old overnight, right? But she grows into this amazing young woman. She is smart, she is caring, she's inventive, and she's firm in her convictions. She still has a lot to learn, just about the world in general. But we see that growth, and by the time we hit season 5, she is a young woman who is the epitome of what a Jedi should be. Okay. Which then leads to her actually walking away from the Jedi Order. Right. And it was so touching, right? She ends up, so let me back up here just a moment. The Jedi are the defenders of peace in the galaxy, right? They're sort of like an interstellar police force, but more than that, it's not like we're going to provide security and stuff for everybody. They go where something that is happening that's beyond the local authorities' ability to deal with. They're negotiators, they're arbiters, and yes, sometimes they have to wage righteous battle, but it's all in the defense of peace and justice and all that good stuff, right? Well, the manipulation of the Jedi Order through the Clone War, which was part of the goal of Senator Palpatine, right? The Emperor of the original trilogy, was to he turns the Jedi into generals. He forces them to fight a war rather than being these defenders. And that starts to corrupt the Order. And I think the Order was having issues before then, but it corrupts the Order. They stop being the defenders of peace and justice and become soldiers. And I'm not saying soldiers are bad, and I'm not saying that soldiers can't defend peace and justice, because, of course, that's also a thing that soldiers can do. But what you end up seeing is that the Order really becomes prideful in a lot of ways, and inflexible in others, and as an institution becomes corrupted, even though certain Jedi, like Obi-Wan Kenobi, are still the epitome of, this is kind of what the Jedi Order does. He's still a general. He's still leading soldiers in war. Yoda is still a kind, caring little green guy, but even he realizes that, yeah, we screwed up, and that shows up a lot in season 6. Well, Ahsoka, we start to see this, and by the time we hit the end of season 5, and Ahsoka is framed for a crime she didn't commit. Somebody is committing bombings on Coruscant, and Ahsoka is getting the blame. Well, throughout the couple of episodes, Ahsoka teams up with a bunch of people, but a bunch of people that maybe the Jedi Order is not pleased with, right? This is your typical political thriller where the people you trust, you can't, and you end up having to trust and are being able to trust people you shouldn't be able to, right? And Ahsoka eventually clears her name, but she realizes that based off of how the Order treated her was sort of this guilty until proven innocent type mentality, and she realizes that the Order has failed, has fallen, and she cannot be a member of it anymore. And so the Order, they admit they were wrong. It says, "Oh, this was your trial. We will now fully raise you to being a Jedi Knight." And she says, "Nope, I can't be part of this anymore," and she leaves. Because she is a person who is firm in her convictions, even when confronting her friends. And this is a powerful example to anybody, Now, you don't have to necessarily agree with everything Ahsoka does or says or is or whatever. But the idea of standing up for what you know is right, even in the face of your friends. Okay, it's one thing to stand up for what's right against your enemies, those who are actively opposed to what you agree with. But those who should support your convictions and don't, to stand up to those types of people for what is right is very hard. Right? You go back to like Harry Potter, where Neville is celebrated by Dumbledore for standing up to his friends for what he knows is right. Okay, so it's this sort of level of conviction of these are the right things to do, and I'm not going to let the order or anyone else stand in my way of doing something that is right, helping people that need to be helped. And that is an amazing trait. So when she leaves the order, the fandom was shocked, and what happens to Ahsoka? What now? And season 6 comes and you don't see Ahsoka at all. Which, is a little disappointing for me, because Ahsoka is my favorite character. But you come into season 7, and the first 4 episodes of season 7, they're all on Disney Plus. Definitely recommend watching the whole season. But the first 4 episodes set up the Bad Batch, and they're great episodes. I mean, they're definitely excellent episodes of the Clone Wars. But the last 8 are Ahsoka dealing with her life outside of the Jedi Order. The first 4 episodes are a storyline of Ahsoka has left the Order. She ends up on level 1313, which in Star Wars canon is notorious for being a wretched hive of scum and villainy, right? It's the slums, it's the ghettos, it's where crime runs rampant, and there really isn't a form of police force or anything to even provide some form of security. And she meets these two women who their family was killed when Jedi were trying to stop a runaway criminal. End up basically, it's one of those cases of, to save a busload of people, something like that, the Jedi pushes a ship or something into a wall, but that wall was the garage, right? They have their mechanics, and it hits the garage and it blows up and killed their parents. And all the Jedi does is, the Force will provide, and may the Force be with you, and leaves. So obviously they're a little bitter about Jedi. So Ahsoka runs into these two, and they have an adventure, and it's great, but it helps Ahsoka realize that, yeah, she can help people even though she's not part of the Order anymore. So when at the end of the episode, Bo-Katan Kryze shows up and says, and tells Ahsoka, we need to retake Mandalore. Darth Maul has been the ruler of Mandalore for a little while. It's time to overthrow him. We need your help. So Ahsoka signs up. And that starts a 4-episode arc, which is one of the best stories in all of Star Wars. And it sort of happens in 2 parts. Ahsoka and Bo-Katan, they go ask the Republic for help. Anakin is, of course, very happy to help her. He returns her lightsabers that she had left behind when she left the Order. he leaves a detachment of the 501st, these clone troopers, with her to help. And she goes off to Mandalore. Now, what's fun is the timing here. The reason that he left the troops with her rather than leading the 501st himself is that he and Obi-Wan are being called back to Coruscant to rescue the Chancellor, who's been captured by the Separatists. Right? That's the fight at the beginning of the movie. General Grievous has Palpatine. And so starting Revenge of the Sith, here's Anakin and Obi-Wan rushing to save the Chancellor. This is what they were rushing from to get there. And you see some of those story points dropped in. Anakin's here, Obi-Wan has gone here. I think there's, you hear Obi-Wan talking to Ahsoka. I think Yoda is talking to Ahsoka. It's like, she's worried about Anakin. Obi-Wan's worried about Anakin. Please contact him. I think he needs your help. And she never does. She never can, because of events that happen that prevent her from doing so. There's always the hint, and I'm not entirely sure it's wrong, that if Ahsoka had actually been able to have that conversation with Anakin, he might not have fallen. But we don't know. And of course, Anakin does fall and becomes Darth Vader. But throughout this last episode, we see Ahsoka at her best, helping those that need help, using the skills that she has gained over years of war. She ends up fighting and capturing Darth Maul. And that lightsaber fight with Darth Maul and Ahsoka Tano is one of the best lightsaber fights I have ever seen. It is so freaking good. It was fun. They actually got Ray Park, who played Darth Maul in The Phantom Menace, to do mocap for Maul for that fight. So he moves just like he does in The Phantom Menace. It is so cool. But that ends the second episode. And now they're episode 3. They're returning to Coruscant with a captured Maul. And she's talking to Rex. And, Ahsoka's hoping that the war is going to be over. Rex is talking about sort of the conflict that the clones have with the war, because without the war, they wouldn't exist. But they also want the war to end. So, it's a really moving conversation between the two of them. And she basically grew up with Rex. He was almost like a second father. Or maybe a grumpy uncle. Right? And she's sitting there on a ship with Maul and just the clones. And clones who were so excited to have her back, they painted their helmets to match the coloring she has on her face. The orange, the white markings, and all that stuff. It's a really touching moment. And then Order 66 comes through. And all of her friends are now her enemies. And she's having to fight not only former friends, but former friends who are wearing her face, because they have her face still painted on their helmets. You see her refusal to abandon Rex, who was a close friend, and rescue him, find the chip that had been implanted in the clones to control them. This is what triggers Order 66. And then the two of them escape. And Maul as well. But that refusal to abandon her friends, that insistence that this is what's right, I'm going to help, even if it's going to make things harder for her. She's still going to help. Right? And this is a character trait you see grow from the annoying little brat that shows up in the Clone Wars movie to the young woman who is sort of lost when she leaves the Order because that's all she's known. And then growing even in through those last 8 episodes of the Clone Wars, growing into almost the epitome of what the Jedi should be. Not rigid and unyielding, but caring and smart, firm in convictions, but not harsh, right? So it's one of those weird balances that a person needs to strike between justice and mercy and caring for others and helping others, sometimes even when it's hard for yourself. So I'm really excited to see her growth, right? You see, she shows up again in Rebels, and I've been going through a Rebels rewatch, so it's been fun to see her show up and guide Kanan and Ezra, and see her face off against Vader. And she was holding her own against Vader. You know, there's a fun scene. You know, she fights Vader, and she's, I will get revenge for all of the Jedi you killed. Vader's, revenge is not the Jedi way. And she's like, I am no Jedi. And it's on, right? And she's holding her own against Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, her master, the one who trained her. Well, she gets rescued because ultimately Vader can't die because he shows up, but she ends up getting rescued. She gets rescued by Ezra through the world between worlds, which is sort of a cosmic time weirdness thing. Seriously, you got to watch the episode to understand it. For me to try to explain it now would be hard. It's hard for me to explain, hard for you to understand. So go watch the episodes. It'll be great. But throughout Rebels, you see her. She is now the wise Jedi. It's 15 years later, and she has grown in wisdom and understanding. She's still confident. She's still inventive. She's still firm in her convictions as a Jedi in all but name. She provides that rock that Kanan and Ezra needs at times during Rebels. And it was great to see her show up again in The Mandalorian, right? Because you've got Din Djarin, who's trying to find somebody who can train Grogu, as Grogu is learning his Force powers. Right, that's his quest, is to find Grogu's family, or his own people, at any rate. And while we never see the planet of Yoda-like creatures, we do see Jedi, namely Ahsoka. Because of Grogu's attachment to Din, she won't train him, and instead sends them on the next step of their quest to put out a call, basically, and hit the Jedi social medias, right? And let's see who shows up. Well, the Empire shows up, but eventually Luke Skywalker shows up. There's a fun fight, and Grogu goes with Luke for training. But you see, Ahsoka is on a quest of her own. She's trying to find Grand Admiral Thrawn, who disappeared with Ezra at the end of Rebels. So they get sort of hyperspaced off to who knows where by the Purgles, the space whales that we actually get to see briefly even in The Mandalorian. And we see Ahsoka again, visiting Luke as he's setting up his new Jedi training temple. He's training Grogu, some fun stuff. And you see that her caring side, again, as she's talking to Din and why he needs to let Grogu train on his own because of that growing attachment. After all, Din is the closest thing to a father Grogu's had for 50 years or something like that. So, well, or at least since the fall of the Jedi Temple, so 20 years maybe. And she's definitely still on her quest to do what's right. So now we've come up to the Ahsoka TV show, and I'm not going to try to predict plot points. Okay, we do know Thrawn is in it. We know a lot of the Rebels crew is in it, and what I want to see from Rebels, it's Rebels 2.0. Now, what I want to see from Ahsoka's show is I want to see her growth. One of my concerns about the character that we see in The Mandalorian is she's very somber. And we see some of that in Rebels. She's serious. She's lost some of her youthful exuberance. But I want to see that she still has some of that joy for life that she had when she was younger. Right? I don't want to totally see her as the sad, depressed Jedi. We've kind of gotten that story. We see it with Obi-Wan a couple of times. We kind of see it with Yoda, for that matter. And I want to see somebody who can remember the joy of life. Now, I'm not going to claim that she's not going to have challenges. Of course she is, right? But I want to see that. But I want to see her continue to grow. I want to see her, all of those things that made her so much fun throughout the Clone Wars and Rebels, that smart, caring, inventive, but fun and joyful. And I want to see all of that. And I'm hoping we do. And, as this comes out, you may have already seen the episode. I don't know. Obviously I haven't seen it yet. The show's not out yet. As I record this, it's not out yet. So I'm excited for it. And as I said, I've loved Ahsoka as a character ever since I've watched the Clone Wars. And I highly recommend, maybe I recommend watching all of the Clone Wars, because it's some of the best Star Wars storytelling ever happens through the Clone Wars and Rebels. But I'm sure Disney Plus has here are the Ahsoka episodes you should catch up on. Okay. Or somebody somewhere, Star Wars News Net, or even StarWars.com probably has a list of, here are the Ahsoka high points to get you into the show. You probably aren't going to necessarily need them, but if you've never seen her in that phase of her life in the Clone Wars and Rebels, definitely go look up a few of those things and just see who she is. If nothing else, watch those last 4 episodes of the Clone Wars. You can watch the last 8 if you want, but the last 4 especially, aside from being amazing Star Wars, really sets up Ahsoka for where she is when you start seeing her in Rebels and then in The Mandalorian. So I think that is it. I love the character of Ahsoka Tano. I hope you get to love her too. And we're going to have some fun watching the series as it goes over the next few weeks. So I'm sure I will be talking about Ahsoka a lot. But until then, and until next time, be excellent to each other. May the Force be with you. And this is Music Free Static signing off.